Welcome everyone to the next instalment of whatever it is that we're trying to do. Save the world, I think. Grow some food and enjoy the process. Wonderful Steve Jones of Sector 39. Welcome again to the Treflach Farm polytunnel. We're here today to talk about...
Well, principle 3, obtain a yield. And again, summary is, how the real world is really complicated. How do we make sense of this complexity? And also the world's constantly changing. So permaculture really looks at patterns and understand that sort of pattern language is a very good way.
From patterns down to details.
That's it.
Try to strip out the complexity to start off with.
Yes, that's it. So we can all kind of start on the same page. And it's almost like we get lost in detail. There's 70 different kinds of aubergine, you know. It's like, I mean...
Which one do you grow
Which one are we going to start with? I don't know, maybe that's not the first question we need to think about, you know. So, and we're doing this. So again, central to the idea within permaculture is the recognition that we all need to eat. You can't work on an empty stomach. So whatever it is that we're doing, we might have all sorts of long-term goals and altruistic things built into it. But our primary motivation for doing anything is we've got to feed ourselves first. Mm-hmm. So, and I can add to that within permaculture there's this ethical framework. And the first ethic in permaculture is you have to meet your own needs first, because you're no good to anybody if you haven't had your breakfast, or lunch or whatever. But you should set limits to consumption, retain some kind of a surplus, and then use that surplus to build things like community, like other yields.
Infrastructure, other yields.
Exactly right. That's right. So we meet our own needs, we retain something, and then we're constantly putting that back. Permaculture encourages us to think about short-term, medium-term, and long-term yields, and to think about how different things very much have their different time frame. Mm-hmm. So, silly example maybe, but when I first heard about the pandemic, and they heard that the shops were going to close and didn't know what's going to happen, is I started sprouting bean sprouts, because you get high value, high nutrient yield very quickly. So I thought, short term, we're in a crisis, short term yield. But we also need to think about really long term things. And I actually think, well, I don't know. Yeah. So there's a few of my thoughts. So as a farmer, obviously, it's all about yields.
Absolutely, everything we do is centred on producing food. I mean, we want to support nature and let nature support us in our goal of producing food. Yeah. So every step we take, we try to consider how we will affect our natural environment and how the natural environment will affect us in our goal of obtaining those yields, but fixing sunlight and making it specifically on this farm into grass, which we then feed to animals, cows, and then we make food out of those animals. And we use those animals to reinforce the beneficial things that we do to the ground to increase the nutrient density in the ground, to be able to grow more grass or more vegetables or whatever. So it's a cyclical process where we're always tweaking with it to try and support all the functions at different points in the cycle.
Yeah. And obviously we've gone through this cycle. We've begun with observe and interact. Then we talked about catch and store energy. And then the third thing then being we have to develop yields from that stored energy. Mm-hmm. So you're also manipulating and managing the behaviour of the animals.
And the landscape as well, yes, over a longer period of time.
So that's actually reinforcing the second principle of catching and storing energy. If you're enhancing carbon sequestration into soil, your soil can store more water. It can absorb more rainfall when it comes, and it can hold it longer. Mm-hmm. So all of these things flow into each other. Now, there's another very important yield that's going on here, and this is actually part of what this discussion is about.
Yeah, so it's at the core focus of regenerative agriculture is about building soil. Yeah, and I think that's what you're coming on to. Want to talk about. Yeah, because we're nothing without the soil around us. I mean, without the dark stuff that's on the crust of the earth, really, there would be no life here at all. And so we're indebted to the microorganisms and the natural processes that have created the soil for us. And it's imperative for us as a species to preserve the soil that we've inherited inherited, and actually going forward, actually to grow that soil so that we and generations going forward will be able to grow healthy, nutritious food.
Someone said to me, what's the difference between agriculture and permaculture? Agriculture, we're growing plants. Permaculture, we're growing soil. How about that? And if you've got good soil, the plants come. So the other thing which within what folded into what you were saying is, and this is the other sort of the yield that also is worth mentioning and naming, is, well, knowledge. We're learning because you're constantly pushing and tweaking and trying things out.
Because you make mistakes, right? When you try, what they say, he who makes no mistakes makes nothing at all.
Yes.
Well, we make lots of things, so we make lots of mistakes.
Yeah.
But that's okay, as long as you see if something's going in the wrong direction, you bring it back in the right direction as quickly as possible, and put in processes that going forward, you reduce the likelihood of making the same mistakes again.
So that's real learning, right? Because it's you're experiencing it firsthand. So there's another, and again, we'll get to this later on, but there's another key idea within permaculture is, especially when you're trying out something new, do it at a small scale. So then your mistakes are learning opportunities rather than,
massive cock-ups.
Yeah, absolutely. Financial disasters, whatever,
out of business,
absolutely. All the other types of phases.
Well, unfortunately, though, you do see large-scale agribusiness, and they, from my perspective, in my context, they are making huge mistakes. And they're denuding the soil, they're nutrient mining, they're extracting goodness out of the earth that's been put down over the last 10,000 years or so, or more.
Yes.
And they're taking it for very, very short-term gain. And yes, they're financially solvent because they're taking that worth out of the land bank, but they're not putting anything back for going forward. And that's not a sustainable way of ensuring our survival.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's ecological asset stripping, if that doesn't sound too jargonistic, but it's
Anyway, but the ways that we can actually make that change that is by using the animals to have a beneficial impact on the ground, to actually sequester carbon, to slow down water as it flows through the landscape, to put nutrients back into the soil that has been denuded, but also build new soil. And we do that with the pigs, doing the compost projects, the holistically planned grazing patterns for the pasture-fed cattle. We do that with biochar that we make from the brash from laying hedges every year, and composting the green waste from the gardens, and a ton of other ways of doing it.
There's the thing. We'll close on this because we're trying to keep these short. But so you've turned hedgerows. For every farmer, I've got to flail my hedge.
Oh my goodness, it's expensive. It's time consuming. I hate it.
Yeah, it's totally pointless. Gives me no yield whatsoever. So you've switched that.
Change it around.
You lay the hedges.
We lay the hedges, which is employment. It's better for birds because we're not destroying their
it becomes now stock-proof, so you don't need secondary wires.
It grows faster, so there's more fodder for the cattle. We get the brash, which we can then make into biochar. It's a win-win-win-win-win.
So there we go. It's a great example.
Reduce costs, increase income, increase biodiversity.
There we go. Obtain a yield. You can't
do
work
bad
on an empty
that.
stomach.
Absolutely.
There we go.
Cheers, Steve.
Thanks,
everyone.